Hey, what's going on, guys? The Horror Man back with the next review of the Terror in the Isles challenge. This time, Jason and I watched Frogs. Ribbit. Frogs is a 1972 horror film starring a very young Sam Elliott without a mustache. And scenes from the movie are featured in Terror in the Isles. We recently reviewed another movie in this challenge starring a young Sam Elliott, The Legacy. In that one, though, he did have a mustache. He's even younger in Frogs. In this one, he plays a photographer named Pickett Smith. He works freelance, and he's currently taking photos of pollution in a Florida swamp. Suddenly, though, his canoe is flipped over as a motorboat almost collides with it. Clint Crockett, who's had a few too many beers, is piloting the motorboat, along with his sister Karen. And speaking of Karen and motorboating, she's played by a very young and very beautiful Joan Van Ark in her very first feature film role. Pickett lost all of his equipment when his canoe was flipped over, and obviously his clothes are soaking wet. Clint and Karen invite him to their family home on the island, where he can dry his clothes. The rest of their family is there too, including Jason Crockett, the elder patriarch of the family. Jason is confined to a wheelchair, but he's clearly still in control of what goes on at the estate. One of the things he can't stand is the constant croaking of the frogs. The Crockett family is very welcoming of Pickett, and they invite him to stay as they celebrate the birthday of 4 family members. It's a yearly tradition for them. They all get together in December to celebrate the 4 birthdays that month, including Jason's. Jason isn't the only one to complain about the frogs either. Other family members have the same complaints. Oddly, though, they've noticed the frogs have gotten bigger, and so have some other wildlife. Well, not unlike the Food of the Gods, which we previously watched and reviewed for this challenge, things get out of control. It seems that maybe as a result of too much pesticide, nature is getting its revenge. One by one, Crockett family members and associates of the family disappear in the swamp. They go in, but they never come out, as the amphibians, reptiles, and other creatures have their way with them. Of course, it's up to Pickett Smith to save the party. I mean, it's Sam Elliott, after all. Speaking of, what is it with Sam Elliott being invited to a rich person's mansion in these movies? First The Legacy, and now Frogs. He's ultimately a stranger in both films, but somehow becomes the hero. I'd say it's the power of the stash, like Tom Atkins, but he's missing the stash in Frogs, as I mentioned. I guess he's just that cool. Frogs, very much like the Food of the Gods, is a blast. This movie is so much fun. My mom is actually a big fan of this movie, and she bought me this DVD years ago. It had been a long time since I revisited it, and man, it still holds up. There is something so comforting and so relaxing about this film. I think it's the Florida swamp scenery and the sounds of nature. The croaks and ribbits, the birds and the crickets. And don't let the title or this cover art fool you. It's actually a pretty serious film. Again, similar to The Food of the Gods, this movie had the potential to be extremely silly. Instead, it takes itself seriously, and once again, it works. Some of the kills are actually pretty disturbing. Who would have thought frogs could be so dangerous? The snakes, that makes sense. The monitors, they're always mean. Spiders, gators, leeches, no surprise. But even typically innocent frogs can be evil in this movie. Not to mention their massive size. And no, they're not as big as they look on this cover. I'd say they're realistically large in this, unlike The Food of the Gods, where the animals were monstrous. Obviously, these two movies go together really well, and if either of them were not in the challenge, they'd each be my relatable recommendation for each other. Both of them also have very dark endings. I love frogs, and believe me, this movie is better than you think. My relatable recommendation is Squirm. Squirm is a 1976 horror film, and instead of killer frogs, this one is about killer worms. Just like frogs, Squirm makes creatures that don't typically seem threatening, threatening. In this movie, downed power lines transform millions of worms into mutant man-eaters. You can watch Squirm to see people get killed by worms, or you can watch Frogs to see people get killed by frogs. Have you seen it? If so, what do you think of it? Comment below and let me know. And please be sure to check out Jason's review. This series isn't croaking yet. We have plenty more to watch and review for the Terror in the Isles Challenge. Until next time, thanks for watching, guys. Hit that thumbs up and be kind. Subscribe.